The golden afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty main road of Silver Creek. Caleb Bennett ran a weathered hand through his dark hair as he finished mending the broken corral fence on the eastern edge of his property. 7 years of relentless work had transformed the once-neglected Lazy Bee Ranch into one of the most respected quarter-horse training facilities in the county. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That should hold through winter, he muttered to himself, satisfaction evident in his voice, despite the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. The distant sound of an unfamiliar engine caught his attention. Visitors were rare this far out. 8 miles from town meant you came to the Lazy Bee with purpose, not by accident. Caleb squinted against the setting sun, watching as an old pickup truck he didn't recognize made its way down the long, winding drive, trailing dust like a comet's tail. The vehicle moved slowly, almost hesitantly, as if the driver wasn't entirely sure they should be there. His cattle dog, Rusty, barked once in alert before racing toward the approaching truck. "Easy, boy," he called, following at a more measured pace. The pickup came to a stop near the barn, dust settling around it like a fine mist. Caleb's boots crunched on the gravel as he approached, curious but cautious about unexpected visitors this close to sundown. When the driver's door opened, his heart seemed to stutter in his chest. "Hello, Caleb." That voice, soft, slightly husky, with that hint of a southern drawl, he'd recognize it anywhere, even after 4 years. Maggie? She looked different. Her once waist-length auburn hair now fell just past her shoulders in loose waves, and her face had lost the carefree softness he remembered. But those eyes, deep green with flecks of gold, were exactly as he remembered from the day she'd left him behind to chase her dreams of becoming a veterinarian in the city. "I didn't expect to ever see you back in Silver Creek," he managed, his throat suddenly dry as desert sand. "I never expected to come back," she admitted, a hint of nervousness in her voice as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But circumstances change. It was then that Caleb noticed movement in the passenger seat of the truck. Maggie followed his gaze and took a deep breath that seemed to steady her. "There's someone you need to meet." She moved to the passenger side and opened the door. Caleb's world tilted on its axis as she carefully unbuckled and lifted out a small bundle wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. "This is Lily," Maggie said softly, turning to face him with the infant cradled in her arms. "She's 8 months old." 8 months! Plus pregnancy. The math wasn't difficult. "She's yours, Caleb." His legs nearly gave out beneath him. He steadied himself against the truck, 1,000 questions rushing through his mind like a flash flood through a canyon. "Mine?" The word came out barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed on the tiny face peering out from the blanket. The baby had his dark hair, and when she blinked up at him, he saw eyes the exact shade of blue that stared back at him from every mirror. Before he could form another coherent thought, a sound from the truck bed caught his attention. The unmistakable soft nicker of a horse in distress. "That's Belle," Maggie explained, following his gaze. "She was injured during a storm last week. Fence came down, and she caught her leg in some barbed wire. I've been treating her, but she needs rest and proper care." Caleb moved to the back of the truck, his mind still reeling from the revelation about the baby, but his instincts as a horseman taking over. Inside the truck bed, a beautiful chestnut mare with a white blaze stood awkwardly, clearly favoring her right front leg, which was wrapped in a professional-looking bandage. "You transported an injured horse in a pickup?" he asked, the horseman in him momentarily outraged. "I didn't have much choice," Maggie replied, a hint of defensiveness in her voice. "The trailer hitch broke 50 miles back, and I couldn't afford repairs. I padded the bed with every blanket I owned and drove slow. It was this or stay, where we weren't welcome anymore." The exhaustion in her voice gave him pause. Looking closer, he noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her clothes hung a bit too loosely on her frame. Whatever had brought Maggie back to Silver Creek with his child and an injured horse, it hadn't been an easy journey. "Let's get her out of there and into a stall," he said, his tone softening. "Then we can talk." Relief flooded Maggie's face. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb lowered the tailgate and carefully helped guide the injured mare down the ramp he always kept nearby for loading. The horse moved stiffly, but seemed to trust his touch, a good sign despite her condition. Maggie followed with the baby held securely against her chest, Rusty circling them curiously but maintaining a respectful distance. The mare's injured leg looked professionally bandaged, and despite the unorthodox transportation, she seemed reasonably comfortable. Caleb had to admit, whatever else had happened in the past 4 years, Maggie clearly knew what she was doing with the horse. "You did your vet training after all," he observed as they settled the mare into a clean stall with fresh bedding and water. "Got my degree," Maggie confirmed, gently bouncing the baby who had started to fuss. "Was working at a practice in Houston until she trailed off, her eyes dropping to the child in her arms. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Until Lily," Caleb finished for her. Maggie nodded. "Among other things. There was a story there, one he sensed he wouldn't like." Once the horse was settled, Caleb led them to the house. The house he'd renovated room by room over the past 4 years, often working by lamplight after long days training horses. The house he'd once imagined sharing with Maggie before she'd left him, with nothing but a brief note explaining that she couldn't give up her dreams for a life in Silver Creek. Inside, Maggie looked around at the changes he'd made. The updated kitchen, the new hardwood floors, the large windows that let in the last golden rays of sunlight. "You finished the renovations," she said softly. "Had time on my hands," he replied, not mentioning the long, lonely evenings when work was the only thing that kept memories at bay. Lily began to cry in earnest now, her tiny face scrunching up with determination. "She's probably hungry," Maggie explained, looking around somewhat helplessly. "Is there somewhere I can feed her?" Caleb gestured to the living room. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll make some coffee." While Maggie settled on the couch with the baby, Caleb busied himself in the kitchen, grateful for the moment to collect his thoughts. A baby. His baby. A daughter he hadn't known existed until 5 minutes ago. And Maggie, back after 4 years, looking worn and worried in a way that the ambitious, confident woman who'd left him had never been. When he returned with 2 mugs of coffee, Maggie had finished feeding Lily and was gently patting her back. The domesticity of the scene in his living room struck him like a physical blow. "She has your eyes," Maggie said quietly as he set her mug on the coffee table. "Why now, Maggie?" he asked, unable to hold back the question any longer. "Why, after almost a year, are you showing up on my doorstep with my daughter?" Maggie's hand stilled on the baby's back. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I tried to make it work on my own," she began. "I really did. I was working at a practice outside Houston. My boss was understanding at first when I got pregnant, but after Lily was born..." She shifted the now dozing baby to her shoulder. "He made it clear that a single mother couldn't give the practice the hours they needed. I found another job at a ranch outside Dallas, working as their on-site vet. It came with housing. A small cabin near the main property." Caleb listened, hearing what she wasn't saying as much as what she was. The strain, the struggle, the loneliness. It was working, barely, until the ranch was sold last month. The new owners had their own veterinarian. We had 30 days to vacate. Her voice cracked slightly. "I tried everywhere, Caleb. Every practice within 100 miles. Nobody wants to take a chance on a new vet with a baby." She finally met his eyes directly. "I was at the end of my rope. Then last week, during that big storm, Belle got injured. She belongs to the ranch owner's daughter, but they were just going to put her down rather than treat her. I couldn't." She swallowed hard. "I couldn't let that happen. So I treated her myself, but that meant I was essentially stealing their horse." "So you packed up a baby and a stolen horse and drove to the one place you swore you'd never return to," Caleb finished for her, understanding dawning. "She's not stolen," Maggie said quickly. "I'll have to check for what she's worth. But yes." She looked down at Lily, now sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. "I didn't know where else to go. My parents moved to Florida last year, and my sister's apartment barely has room for her, let alone us, and a horse. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken history and fresh complications. "How long are you planning to stay?" Caleb asked, his voice carefully neutral. Maggie hesitated. "I don't know. I have enough savings for a few weeks at the motel in town while I look for work. I thought maybe Doc Wilson might need help at his practice. He's getting on in years." Caleb looked at Lily, his daughter, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the tension in the room or the massive shift her existence had created in his world. Something protective and fierce welled up inside him at the thought of this tiny person, his flesh and blood, staying in some rundown motel while Maggie scrambled for work. "Stay here," he said, the words surprising even himself. "The ranch has plenty of room, at least until we figure things out." Tears gathered in Maggie's eyes. "Caleb, I can't ask that of you after everything." "You're not asking, I'm offering," he interrupted, his voice firm. "That child is half mine, even if I'm just learning about her. I won't have my daughter staying in some motel when there's space here." What he didn't say was how his heart had leapt at the sight of Maggie despite the years of hurt. How, despite everything, a part of him had never stopped loving the woman who'd shattered his world when she left. "And Belle needs proper care," he added, giving them both an easier reason to accept his offer. "You can't exactly keep a horse at the Silver Creek Motel." A tear finally escaped down Maggie's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, the sun had set completely, painting the sky in deep purples and blues. Inside, 4 lives, a man's, a woman's, a baby's, and a wounded horse's, were now unexpectedly intertwined. Caleb Bennett, son of the soil, horse trainer, solitary rancher, was now apparently a father, and the woman who had left him behind had brought his child back to him. What happened next? Well, that remained to be seen. Morning came too quickly for Caleb. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds as he stared at the ceiling, wondering if yesterday had been some kind of elaborate dream. But the unfamiliar sounds drifting from the kitchen told him otherwise. Soft footsteps, the gentle clink of dishes, a baby's happy gurgle. They were real. Maggie was real. The baby, his daughter, was real. He dressed quickly, pausing at the mirror to run a hand through his dark hair. The face that looked back at him seemed different somehow. The same features, but with new purpose etched into them. When he entered the kitchen, he found Maggie at the stove making scrambled eggs, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. Lily sat in a portable high chair Maggie must have brought with them, happily mashing banana pieces between her tiny fingers. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. 2 pairs of eyes turned to him, one cautious green, one innocent blue. "We tried to be quiet," Maggie said. "I hope we didn't wake you." "I'm usually up with the sun," he replied, moving to the coffee maker that was already filled with fresh coffee. "Ranch work doesn't wait." He poured himself a mug, then turned to look at Lily, really look at her in the clear morning light. The baby grinned at him, revealing 2 tiny bottom teeth, her face smeared with banana. His heart did a strange flip in his chest. "She's a morning person," Maggie offered. "Always wakes up happy." "Gets that from your side then," Caleb said with the ghost of a smile. "I've been told I growl more than talk before my first coffee." A small laugh escaped Maggie, perhaps the first genuine one since her arrival. Some things never change. After breakfast, the normality of the scene struck him suddenly. This little family gathered around his table as if they belonged there. 4 years ago, he'd imagined mornings like this with Maggie. But that dream had ridden out of town along with her. "I should check on Belle," Maggie said, rising to clear the dishes. "I'll come with you," Caleb offered. "Need to check the other horses anyway." They walked to the barn together, Lily balanced on Maggie's hip, looking around with wide-eyed interest at the new surroundings. The morning was cool, but promised heat later, the kind of late spring day that hinted at the summer to come. Belle nickered softly when she saw Maggie approach her stall. The mare looked better after a night of rest, though she still favored her injured leg. "Let me see what we're dealing with," Caleb said, entering the stall carefully. Maggie passed him the baby without hesitation. "Hold her for a minute. She'll pull my hair if I bend down with her." Before he could protest, Caleb found himself holding his daughter for the first time. Lily regarded him solemnly for a moment, then reached out a sticky hand to pat his cheek with surprising gentleness. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, the words coming naturally, despite his inexperience. While Maggie examined Belle's injured leg, Caleb found himself swaying slightly, a rocking motion that seemed to please Lily. She babbled something incomprehensible but clearly delighted. "She likes you," Maggie observed, glancing up from her work. "Lucky coincidence," Caleb replied. "Horses and babies both respond well to steady, calm energy." Maggie smiled slightly. "She doesn't take to strangers easily. Must be sensing something familiar in you." The thought that his daughter might somehow recognize some part of him, despite having never met him before yesterday, created a warm feeling in Caleb's chest. "How's the leg?" he asked, nodding toward Belle. "Better than I expected," Maggie replied, rewrapping the bandage with practiced hands. "The wound is clean, no sign of infection. She's young and healthy otherwise. With proper rest and care, she should recover fully." "You did good work," Caleb acknowledged, professional respect evident in his voice. "4 years of vet school better have taught me something," Maggie said with a small smile. She finished with Belle and straightened up, dusting hay from her jeans. "Though I specialized in large animals, not just horses." "Doc Wilson could use someone with those skills around here," Caleb observed. "Last I heard, he was talking about cutting back his hours. Too many midnight calls for colicky horses and calving heifers." Hope flickered across Maggie's face. "You think he might take me on, even with—" She nodded toward Lily, who had begun to play with the buttons on Caleb's shirt. "Only one way to find out," Caleb replied. "I can make a call if you want. He still comes out every couple months to check my breeding stock." "I'd appreciate that," Maggie said softly. Later, while Maggie settled Lily for a morning nap in the guest room, Caleb called his foreman Jake to handle the day's training sessions. For the first time in years, the ranch would have to manage without him for a day. "She seems like a good baby," Caleb said, joining Maggie on the porch, where she was watching a pair of hawks circling lazily over the pasture. "She is," Maggie agreed. "Easy temperament, curious about everything. She's had to adapt a lot, moving from place to place, but she's resilient." "Like her mother," Caleb observed, unable to keep a hint of something, not quite bitterness, but close from his voice. Maggie's shoulders tensed. "Caleb, I know you have questions, things I need to explain." "Why didn't you tell me?" he interrupted, the question that had burned in him since yesterday finally escaping. "Almost a year, Maggie. You knew for almost a year that I had a child, and you never once picked up a phone." She looked away, watching a butterfly land on the porch railing. "I found out I was pregnant 2 months after I left," she said quietly. "I was barely making rent, working at the university vet clinic during the day and waiting tables at night. My dream was finally happening, but it was harder than I had expected." She paused. "I knew if I told you, you'd do the right thing. You'd insist on taking care of us, maybe even ask me to come back. And I couldn't. I wasn't ready to admit that I was struggling. So you decided I didn't deserve to know my own child." The hurt in his voice was unmistakable. "No. Yes. I don't know." Maggie sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I didn't want to be the reason you gave up on your dreams for this place. And I was. I was too proud to admit I'd made a mistake. So instead, my daughter grew up without a father." Maggie flinched at the accusation. "I made choices I have to live with," she said softly. "But I'm here now because she deserves better. Because I realized that my pride isn't worth her happiness." Before Caleb could respond, a cry came from inside the house. Lily had awakened from her nap. "I should get her," Maggie said, standing quickly, perhaps relieved at the interruption. Caleb nodded, still processing her words. Pride. Dreams. Mistakes. The same reasons that had taken Maggie away from him were the ones that had kept him from knowing his daughter. The irony wasn't lost on him. When Maggie returned with a freshly awakened Lily, the baby's face lit up at the sight of Caleb, arms reaching toward him with unmistakable intent. "She wants you to hold her," Maggie said, sounding slightly surprised. Caleb took the baby, settling her on his lap. Lily immediately began playing with the buttons on his shirt again, apparently having decided they were the most fascinating objects in the world. "She never does that," Maggie observed, watching them with a strange expression. Usually takes her weeks to warm up to someone new. Maybe she knows, Caleb said quietly, looking down at the dark curls on his daughter's head. On some level, maybe she knows who I am. The thought hung between them, both painful and hopeful. That evening, after helping settle Lily into the portable crib Maggie had set up in the guest room, Caleb found himself alone with Maggie in the living room. The silence between them felt weighted with all that remained unsaid. "I can take the couch," Maggie offered, breaking the silence. "No need. The house has 3 bedrooms. You and Lily take the guest room downstairs. It's bigger anyway." She nodded, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, a nervous habit she'd had since high school. Some things never changed. "Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Leaving, I mean." Surprise flickered across her face at the direct question. "Parts of it," she admitted after a moment. "I don't regret going to vet school. That was the right decision. But how I left. The note? Not talking it through? Yes, I regret that every day." "And now?" Caleb pressed. "Coming back here with Lily, what are you hoping for?" Maggie met his gaze steadily. "I'm hoping my daughter gets to know her father. I'm hoping to find work that lets me use my degree while still being a good mother. I'm hoping—" She hesitated. "I'm hoping you can forgive me enough that we can figure out how to be parents together, even if we can't be anything else." The honesty in her voice was disarming. Caleb found himself nodding slowly. "I can work with that," he said finally. One day at a time. After Maggie had gone to bed, Caleb stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the cool night air. The stars spread across the sky like diamonds scattered on velvet, the same stars he'd wished upon as a boy. He never wished for this, to meet his daughter as a stranger, to face the woman who had broken his heart with so many complicated emotions still churning inside him. But sometimes life gave you not what you wished for, but what you needed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments of awkwardness and discovery. But tonight, under the vast Texas sky, Caleb allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Possibility. A week passed in a blur of adjustments and discoveries. Caleb learned that Lily loved the sound of his deep laugh and would try to mimic it with her own burbling giggles. He discovered she could already pull herself up to standing and would cruise along the edge of the coffee table with determined concentration. He found out she hated peas but would eagerly eat sweet potatoes, and that she had a stuffed rabbit named Hoppy that was essential for peaceful bedtimes. Little by little, he was getting to know his daughter, falling more deeply under her spell with each passing day. But Belle, the injured mare, remained wary of him, shying away whenever he approached her stall, accepting care only from Maggie. The horse's reluctance was a splinter under Caleb's skin, a constant, subtle pain. As a trainer known for his way with even the most difficult horses, Belle's rejection felt personal somehow. "She just needs time," Maggie assured him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky while Lily played with blocks on a blanket between them. "She's been through a lot." "She's fine with you," Caleb observed, watching as Lily carefully stacked one block on top of another with intense concentration. Maggie smiled softly. "I was the one who treated her when she was hurt. In her mind, I'm safe. With you, there's no history yet, just uncertainty." Caleb nodded, though the explanation did little to ease the ache in his chest. He wanted so badly to connect with the injured mare, to prove that his hands could heal, as well as train. The opportunity came, unexpectedly 3 days later. Caleb was in the barn early, before sunrise, checking on a mare that looked close to foaling. As he passed Belle's stall, a soft, distressed nicker caught his attention. The chestnut mare was lying down, breathing heavily, her eyes showing white around the edges, a clear sign of pain. Without hesitation, Caleb entered the stall, speaking in the low, steady voice he used with frightened horses. "Easy, girl. Easy now. Let's see what's troubling you." Belle's ears flicked toward him, but she made no attempt to rise or shy away. Kneeling beside her, Caleb ran experienced hands along her body, checking for signs of colic or other distress. When he reached her bandaged leg, he noticed the wrapping had slipped, exposing the healing wound. The area was hot to the touch, a possible infection brewing. "Gonna help you, pretty lady," he murmured, continuing to stroke her neck as he considered what to do. He could wake Maggie, but his instincts told him Belle needed immediate attention. Moving slowly and deliberately, he gathered the supplies he'd need from the medical kit Maggie had left in the barn. Clean water, antiseptic solution, fresh bandages. As he worked, he kept up a steady stream of soft words, telling Belle about the ranch, about the gentle training methods he used, about how much her recovery mattered. The mare remained still under his ministrations, her breathing gradually slowing, her eyes softening as the pain eased. By the time he finished rewrapping the leg with fresh bandages, Belle had rested her head on the straw, relaxed enough to doze despite his presence. That's how Maggie found them an hour later when she came looking for Caleb, concern on her face at finding his bed empty so early. She paused in the stall doorway, taking in the scene of Caleb sitting quietly beside the dozing mare, one hand resting lightly on her neck. "She let you treat her," Maggie said softly, wonder in her voice. Caleb nodded. "She was hurting. Sometimes pain makes the decision for us. Trust or suffer more." "What happened?" "Bandage slipped, irritated the wound. Caught it before infection really took hold. She should be fine now, but might want to start her on antibiotics to be safe." Maggie knelt on Belle's other side, checking Caleb's work with professional eyes. "This is perfect," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Where did you learn to rap like this?" "Had a horse step in a gopher hole years back. Severed a tendon. Doc Wilson showed me how to do the daily care. Got pretty good at it." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Belle chose that moment to lift her head, nickering softly at Maggie in greeting. But, and this was new, she didn't shy away from Caleb's touch. Instead, she nudged his hand gently with her muzzle, a horse's version of gratitude. "Look at that," Maggie whispered. "You've made a friend." "Sometimes all it takes is being there when they need you most," Caleb replied, stroking Belle's forehead gently. Their eyes met over the horse's body, something unspoken passing between them. Trust, need, healing. The parallels weren't lost on either of them. Later that day, Doc Wilson came by the ranch in response to Caleb's call. The elderly veterinarian examined both Belle and Maggie's credentials with equal thoroughness, nodding in approval at both. "Young lady," he said finally, closing Maggie's diploma folder, "I've been looking for someone to take over my large animal practice for 2 years. Nobody wants to settle in a small town these days." He glanced at Lily, who was happily playing with Rusty under Caleb's watchful eye. "I can't offer big city money, but I can offer flexible hours and a chance to build something lasting." The hope that bloomed on Maggie's face was like sunrise after a long night. "Are you serious?" "Serious as a colic and a valuable stallion," Doc replied with a wink. "You've got good hands and a good education. That's rare enough these days. The fact that you cared enough to save this mare instead of letting her be put down tells me everything else I need to know about your character." After the veterinarian left, promising to have paperwork ready by the end of the week, Maggie stood in the middle of the kitchen looking shell-shocked. "Did that really just happen?" she asked, turning to Caleb, who was feeding Lily small pieces of cheese at the table. "Told you he was looking," Caleb replied, unable to keep a small smile from his face at her obvious delight. "Silver Creek needs a good vet, and from what I've seen, you fit the bill." "This changes everything," Maggie said, sinking into a... The golden afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty main road of Silver Creek. Caleb Bennett ran a weathered hand through his dark hair as he finished mending the broken corral fence on the eastern edge of his property. 7 years of relentless work had transformed the once-neglected Lazy Bee Ranch into one of the most respected quarter-horse training facilities in the county. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "That should hold through winter," he muttered to himself, satisfaction evident in his voice, despite the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. The distant sound of an unfamiliar engine caught his attention. Visitors were rare this far out. 8 miles from town meant you came to the Lazy Bee with purpose, not by accident. Caleb squinted against the setting sun, watching as an old pickup truck he didn't recognize made its way down the long, winding drive, trailing dust like a comet's tail. The vehicle moved slowly, almost hesitantly, as if the driver wasn't entirely sure they should be there. His cattle dog, Rusty, barked once in alert before racing toward the approaching truck. "Easy, boy," he called, following at a more measured pace. The pickup came to a stop near the barn, dust settling around it like a fine mist. Caleb's boots crunched on the gravel as he approached, curious but cautious about unexpected visitors this close to sundown. When the driver's door opened, his heart seemed to stutter in his chest. "Hello, Caleb." That voice, soft, slightly husky, with that hint of a southern drawl. He'd recognize it anywhere, even after 4 years. Maggie? She looked different. Her once waist-length auburn hair now fell just past her shoulders in loose waves, and her face had lost the carefree softness he remembered. But those eyes, deep green with flecks of gold, were exactly as he remembered from the day she'd left him behind to chase her dreams of becoming a veterinarian in the city. "I didn't expect to ever see you back in Silver Creek," he managed, his throat suddenly dry as desert sand. "I never expected to come back," she admitted, a hint of nervousness in her voice as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But circumstances change. It was then that Caleb noticed movement in the passenger seat of the truck. Maggie followed his gaze and took a deep breath that seemed to steady her. "There's someone you need to meet." She moved to the passenger side and opened the door. Caleb's world tilted on its axis as she carefully unbuckled and lifted out a small bundle wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. "This is Lily," Maggie said softly, turning to face him with the infant cradled in her arms. "She's 8 months old." 8 months! Plus pregnancy. The math wasn't difficult. "She's yours, Caleb." His legs nearly gave out beneath him. He steadied himself against the truck, 1,000 questions rushing through his mind like a flash flood through a canyon. "Mine?" The word came out barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed on the tiny face peering out from the blanket. The baby had his dark hair, and when she blinked up at him, he saw eyes the exact shade of blue that stared back at him from every mirror. Before he could form another coherent thought, a sound from the truck bed caught his attention. The unmistakable soft nicker of a horse in distress. "That's Belle," Maggie explained, following his gaze. "She was injured during a storm last week. Fence came down, and she caught her leg in some barbed wire. I've been treating her, but she needs rest and proper care." Caleb moved to the back of the truck, his mind still reeling from the revelation about the baby, but his instincts as a horseman taking over. Inside the truck bed, a beautiful chestnut mare with a white blaze stood awkwardly, clearly favoring her right front leg, which was wrapped in a professional-looking bandage. "You transported an injured horse in a pickup?" he asked, the horseman in him momentarily outraged. "I didn't have much choice," Maggie replied, a hint of defensiveness in her voice. "The trailer hitch broke 50 miles back, and I couldn't afford repairs. I padded the bed with every blanket I owned and drove slow. It was this or stay, where we weren't welcome anymore." The exhaustion in her voice gave him pause. Looking closer, he noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her clothes hung a bit too loosely on her frame. "Whatever, I could actually stay here, build a practice, give Lily stability." The implications hung in the air between them. Staying meant figuring out a more permanent arrangement for Lily, for the three of them as a family of sorts. "We'll work it out," Caleb said simply, wiping cheese from Lily's chin. "Like I said before, one day at a time." That night, after Lily was asleep, Caleb found Maggie in the barn, checking on Belle one last time before bed. The mare greeted her with a soft nicker, then, surprisingly, extended the same greeting to Caleb. "She trusts you now," Maggie observed, watching as Belle allowed Caleb to stroke her neck. "Smart horse." "Smart horse indeed," Caleb agreed, running his hand along the mare's sleek neck. "Knows when she's found people who'll take care of her." Maggie was quiet for a moment, just watching them. "I didn't expect this," she said finally. "Any of it. You taking us in. Doc offering me a job. Belle accepting you, Lily." She smiled softly. Lily falling in love with her father so quickly. The word love hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond the context of their daughter. "Life has a way of surprising you," Caleb said quietly. "Just when you think you've got it all figured out, everything changes. Like a baby and a lame horse showing up on your doorstep." Maggie offered with a small smile. "Exactly like that." He met her eyes in the dim light of the barn. "For what it's worth, I'm glad they did." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Even after everything?" "Even after everything," he confirmed. "Some things are worth the hurt that came before." As they walked back to the house together, a comfortable silence between them, Caleb realized something had shifted. The anger that had been his constant companion whenever he thought of Maggie these past 4 years had begun to fade, replaced by something more complex, more hopeful. They weren't the same people who had loved and lost each other 4 years ago. Life had shaped them, hardened them in some ways, softened them in others. But maybe, just maybe, these new versions of themselves could build something different, something stronger, because it was forged in the knowledge of what they stood to lose. 2 weeks turned into a month. The rhythms of ranch life embraced the newcomers as if the land had been waiting for them all along. Lily took her first unassisted steps in the kitchen, wobbling across the tile floor into Caleb's waiting arms, her face alight with triumph. Belle's leg healed steadily, and soon she was able to put weight on it without pain, her trust in both Maggie and Caleb growing stronger each day. And Maggie. She'd started working with Doc Wilson 3 days a week, coming home with stories of difficult calves delivered and colicky horses saved. The light had returned to her eyes, the passionate spark that Caleb had always admired, even when it had led her away from him. They'd fallen into a routine of sorts, Maggie and Caleb sharing parenting duties and ranch chores, family dinners where they'd talk about their respective days, evenings on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples. It was comfortable, it was confusing. It was nothing like the life Caleb had imagined for himself after Maggie left. And yet somehow it fit, like finding a puzzle piece you didn't know was missing. Jake, Caleb's foreman, had taken to Lily immediately, fashioning her a tiny cowboy hat from an old felt one of his. The ranch hands treated Maggie with a careful respect that gradually warmed to genuine friendship as she proved her skill with their horses and cattle. "She's good people," Jake observed one afternoon as they watched Maggie examine a mare in the breeding program. "Different from before." Caleb nodded, knowing exactly what his friend meant. The Maggie who had returned was not the restless dreamer who had left. This Maggie had been tempered by struggle and responsibility, her ambitions shaped by reality, but not diminished. "Think she'll stay this time?" Jake asked, the question casual but weighted. "Hope so," Caleb replied, his eyes following Maggie as she moved on to the next horse. "Not just for Lily's sake." Jake clapped him on the shoulder with understanding. "Some fires don't ever really go out, boss. Just bank down to embers, waiting for the right breeze." The right breeze came in the form of a summer storm. The kind that rolled in from the west with little warning, dark clouds building on the horizon like a mountain range appearing out of nowhere. Caleb watched it approach from the porch, calculating how long before it would hit. "Jake," he called to his foreman, "better get those yearlings into the south pasture shelter." "This one looks mean," Jake agreed, already heading toward the barn. The sound of Maggie's old truck caught his attention as it pulled into the driveway earlier than expected. Lily was secured in her car seat, and Maggie quickly unbuckled her, hurrying toward the house as the first fat raindrops began to fall. "Dock closed early," she explained, raising her voice over the rising wind. Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning. Together they hurried toward the house, the rain coming harder now, driven sideways by gusts that bent the tall grass and set the windmill spinning wildly. Inside, Lily immediately toddled to the window, pressing her small hands against the glass to watch the spectacle of the storm. "Rain! Rain!" she exclaimed, her growing vocabulary a constant source of delight for both adults. "Yes, sweetheart, big rain." Maggie agreed, running a towel over her damp hair. Thunder cracked overhead, startlingly loud, making Lily jump and her face crumple in the precursor to tears. Before Maggie could move, Caleb was there, scooping up his daughter. "Hey, sunshine girl," he said gently. "That's just the sky talking. Nothing to be scared of. Want to help me check our storm supplies?" Lily nodded against his shoulder, her momentary fear forgotten in the important task her father offered. Caleb carried her to the hallway closet, where flashlights, batteries, and other emergency supplies were kept neatly organized. "You're so good with her," Maggie said softly, watching from the doorway as Caleb let Lily help him count the flashlights, her small hands patting each one as he named the colors. "Easy to be good with something so perfect," Caleb replied, looking up to meet Maggie's eyes over their daughter's dark curls. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken thoughts, until the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. "Should probably start dinner before we lose power," Maggie suggested, breaking the spell. "I think there's enough for a stew." "Sounds perfect for a night like this," Caleb agreed, handing Lily a small flashlight of her own. "Look, sunshine, this one's just your size." Lily's face lit up with delight as she discovered the button that made the beam appear, pointing it at the wall, the ceiling, her own foot, each new target eliciting a giggle of joy. In the kitchen, Maggie moved with easy familiarity, gathering ingredients and starting the promised stew. Over the past month, she'd learned where everything was kept, had slowly begun adding her own touches. A plant on the windowsill, colorful dish towels hanging from the oven handle, Lily's drawings magneted to the refrigerator. It struck Caleb suddenly how right it felt, watching her move through his kitchen, hearing Lily's happy babbling from the living room, where she continued to explore the wonders of her flashlight. His house had become a home when he wasn't looking, filled with sounds and smells and small evidences of life being lived fully. "What's that look for?" Maggie asked, catching him watching her. "Nothing," he replied, shaking his head. "Just thinking." "Dangerous pastime," she teased, the easy banter between them another development of recent weeks. "I should check on Belle," Caleb said, remembering the mare's previous fear of storms. "She might be spooked by the thunder." "I'll come too," Maggie decided. "Let me just get Lily's raincoat." The three of them made a dash for the barn through the pouring rain, Lily shrieking with excitement at the adventure of it all, her yellow raincoat bright against the gray day. Inside the barn, the horses were restless but not panicked, moving in their stalls, ears flicking toward each new crack of thunder. All except Belle, who stood calmly in her stall, watching their approach with interested eyes. "Well, look at you," Caleb said admiringly, approaching the mare's stall. "Not bothered by a little noise, are you, girl?" Belle nickered softly, extending her head over the stall door to snuffle at his pockets for treats. Caleb laughed, pulling out the apple pieces he'd stashed there earlier, a habit formed over weeks of working to gain the mare's trust. "I think she's ready," Maggie said, watching the interaction with thoughtful eyes. "Ready?" Caleb questioned, stroking Belle's sleek neck. "To be ridden. The legs healed enough for light exercise, and she needs to start rebuilding muscle." Maggie stepped closer, running a professional hand along the mare's foreleg. "I'd say another week of hand-walking. Then she could carry a rider for short periods." "You'll be the one to do it," Caleb said. Not a question, but a statement. "Actually," Maggie looked up at him, a strange expression on her face, "I was thinking you should be her rider." Caleb blinked in surprise. "Me? But she's your horse." "She trusts you now," Maggie pointed out, "and you're the trainer. Besides," her voice softened, "I've seen how you look at her. You two belong together." Before Caleb could respond, a particularly violent thunderclap shook the barn, followed immediately by the unmistakable sound of the power going out. The subtle background hum of electricity suddenly silent. "And there go the lights," he sighed. "Good thing we came prepared." He pulled out his flashlight, and Lily immediately did the same, her smaller beam waving wildly around the barn. "Light!" she announced proudly. "That's right, sunshine. You're lighting our way home," Caleb agreed, hoisting her onto his shoulders for the dash back to the house. By the time they returned, thoroughly soaked despite their rain gear, darkness had fallen completely, the storm-blackened sky robbing them of even twilight's glow. Caleb built a fire in the living room fireplace while Maggie changed Lily into dry clothes. Soon the living room was bathed in the warm glow of firelight, shadows dancing on the walls as the storm continued its assault outside. Caleb had pulled the coffee table aside and spread blankets on the floor, creating a cozy nest where Lily now sat, fascinated by the dancing flames. "Pretty," she said, pointing at the fire. "Very pretty," Maggie agreed, settling beside her daughter. "But hot. We don't touch." "No touch," Lily repeated solemnly, a lesson already well learned about the stove. Caleb joined them on the blankets, completing their small circle. "Looks like we're having an indoor campout tonight," he observed, setting a plate of cheese, crackers, and sliced apples between them. A makeshift dinner in lieu of the stew left half prepared when the power failed. "Worst timing," Maggie sighed. "That stew would have been perfect for a night like this." "This is perfect too," Caleb said quietly, watching as Lily carefully selected a piece of cheese, examining it closely before popping it into her mouth. Different than planned, but still good. Their eyes met over their daughter's head, both recognizing the words applied to more than just dinner. "Tell story?" Lily requested, her limited vocabulary still able to make her desires perfectly clear. "What kind of story would you like?" Caleb asked, settling more comfortably against the couch. "Horse story?" Lily replied immediately, her current favorite topic. Caleb smiled. "Well, I think I know just the one. It's about a beautiful mare named Star, who got lost in a storm, much like this one." As he spun his tale, 1 part memory, 2 parts invention, he watched Lily's face in the firelight, her expressions shifting from wonder to concern to delight as the story unfolded. Maggie watched too, occasionally adding a detail or asking a question that expanded the narrative. It felt right. The three of them sheltered together while the storm raged outside, connected by story and firelight and the simple comfort of being together. When the tale concluded with Star finding her way home to her worried owner, Lily clapped her hands with delight. "Gain!" she demanded. "I think that's enough excitement for tonight," Maggie said, smoothing her daughter's wild curls. "It's past bedtime for little cowgirls." "But the lights are still out," Caleb pointed out reasonably. "And her room will be cold without the heater running." "Then we'll have a camping adventure," Maggie decided. "Right here, by the fire." Lily's enthusiastic agreement sent Caleb upstairs with his flashlight, returning with her small bedroll and favorite stuffed animals. Soon they had created a cozy nest for the toddler, right in front of the hearth. After teeth were brushed by flashlight and a bedtime song sung by firelight, Lily snuggled into her makeshift bed, Hoppy the rabbit clutched firmly to her chest. "Night-night, Mommy," she said, reaching up for her customary kiss. "Night-night, Daddy." The word, so casually offered, stopped Caleb in his tracks. It was the first time Lily had called him Daddy instead of the KK she'd been using since her arrival. The simple transition felt monumental. "Night-night, sunshine," he managed, his voice rough with emotion as he bent to kiss her forehead. "Sweet dreams." Within minutes, Lily was asleep, her breathing deep and even, small face peaceful in the flickering light of the fire. Caleb remained sitting on the floor beside her, unwilling to break the spell of the moment. After a while, he felt Maggie's presence as she sat beside him, her shoulder just touching his. "She called me Daddy," Caleb whispered, still hardly believing it. "I heard," Maggie replied, her voice equally soft. "She's been practicing when you're not around. I told her it was up to her what to call you." "I never thought," Caleb began, then stopped, overwhelmed. "When you left, I figured my chance at a family was gone. Threw myself into the ranch instead." Maggie was quiet for a long moment. "I've never apologized properly," she said finally. "For leaving the way I did, for keeping her from you." "No, you haven't," Caleb agreed, his tone free of accusation, just stating a fact. Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, the spaces between thunderclaps growing longer, the rain softening from violent sheets to a steady patter. "I'm sorry, Caleb," Maggie whispered, her voice breaking on his name. "I was young and selfish and scared. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for everyone, but the truth is, I was mostly thinking of myself." In the firelight, he could see tears tracking silently down her cheeks. Without thinking, he reached out and brushed one away with his thumb. "I kept telling myself I was protecting you from obligation, protecting myself from giving up my dreams," she continued. "But really, I was just afraid. Afraid I couldn't be both, a mother and a veterinarian. Afraid you'd resent me for changing our plans. Afraid I'd resent you if I stayed. And now? Caleb asked quietly. Now I know better, she replied, looking at their sleeping daughter. I know that plans change, dreams evolve, that being a mother doesn't mean giving up everything else, just rearranging priorities. That the hardest things are often the most worthwhile. She met his eyes directly. I know that running away from fear just leads to different fears. And I know that the biggest mistake of my life was not giving us, you and me, the chance to figure it out together. Caleb absorbed her words, feeling the weight of them, the sincerity behind them. The anger he'd carried for so long seemed to have dissolved without his noticing, replaced by something both more complicated and more hopeful. Thank you, he said simply, for bringing her back to me now. Their eyes met in the dying firelight, years of hurt and hope passing between them. Slowly, as if drawn by forces beyond his control, Caleb leaned forward. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. Maggie's hand came up to rest against his chest, neither pushing him away nor pulling him closer. When they parted, her eyes remained closed for a heartbeat longer, as if she was memorizing the moment. I'm not the same girl who left, she whispered when she finally looked at him. And I'm not the same man you left behind, Caleb agreed. So where does that leave us? Caleb looked at their sleeping daughter, peaceful in the fading firelight. Then back to Maggie's questioning eyes. Maybe, he said carefully, it leaves us with a chance to find out who we are now, together. The lights flickered suddenly, then came back on, the modern world intruding on their firelit cocoon. But neither moved to break the spell that had settled around them. Outside, the storm continued to recede, leaving behind a world washed clean, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the windows, and Lily's delighted discovery that her camping adventure had extended through the night. She sat up in her nest of blankets, hair tousled from sleep, a smile of pure joy spreading across her face when she spotted both her parents asleep nearby. Maggie curled on the couch, Caleb in the armchair, both within easy reach of her makeshift bed. Up, up, she announced, scrambling to her feet and toddling over to pat Caleb's knee insistently. Hungry! Caleb opened one eye, pretending to still be asleep. Is someone talking? I don't see anyone. Lily giggled, climbing onto his lap with the determined agility of a toddler on a mission. Me talking? Lily hungry? Oh, there you are, Caleb said, opening both eyes wide in exaggerated surprise. I thought a little mouse was in the house. Their laughter woke Maggie, who sat up slowly, stretching muscles stiff from the awkward sleeping position. What time is it? She asked, voice husky with sleep. Early, Caleb replied, checking his watch. Not quite 6. But someone has declared breakfast time officially open. Pancakes, Lily suggested hopefully, having recently discovered this particular breakfast delight. I think that can be arranged, Maggie agreed, running a hand through her tangled hair. Let me just freshen up first. As she disappeared toward the bathroom, Caleb carried Lily to the kitchen, settling her in her high chair with a handful of dry cereal to tide her over. Let's get some coffee going for Mommy, he told her conspiratorially. She's a bit of a bear without it. Like, real bear? Lily asked, eyes wide with both concern and excitement at the possibility. Not quite that scary, Caleb assured her with a wink. Just a little growly. By the time Maggie joined them, coffee was brewing, and Caleb had started gathering ingredients for pancakes. She paused in the doorway, watching them together. Lily chattering away in her mix of real words and baby talk, Caleb responding as if he understood every syllable. The easy rapport between father and daughter, built in just a few short weeks, made her heart ache with both joy and regret for the time lost. What can I do to help? She asked, pushing away the useless regret to focus on the present. You can make the pancake faces, Caleb suggested. I never get the eyes right. It was such a simple thing, making breakfast together on a sunny morning after a storm, but Maggie felt its significance deeply. This was what they could have had all along. What they might still have, if they were brave enough to try again. Later, after breakfast was cleared away and Lily was contentedly playing with her blocks on the living room floor, Caleb brought up the subject they'd both been avoiding in the clear light of day. "About last night," he began, keeping his voice low. "The kiss," Maggie supplied, meeting his eyes directly. No point in dancing around it. "Yes." He took a deep breath. "I don't regret it." "Neither do I," she admitted. "But Caleb, we need to be careful. There's more at stake now than just our hearts." He followed her gaze to where Lily sat, happily absorbed in her play. "I know. She comes first, always." "So what do we do?" Maggie asked. "Take it slow?" "Slower than last time," Caleb agreed with a slight smile. "We jumped straight from high school sweethearts to planning forever. Maybe this time we get to know each other again first. Figure out who we are now, what we want." "I'd like that," Maggie said softly. "A fresh start." "Speaking of fresh starts," Caleb said, changing the subject slightly, "I think Belle's ready for that hand-walking you mentioned. Want to bring Lily out to the barn and we can get started on her rehabilitation plan?" The gratitude in Maggie's eyes told him she understood what he was doing, giving them both space to process while keeping things moving forward, one step at a time, literally and figuratively. Out in the barn, Belle greeted them with an eager nicker, clearly ready for more activity than her stall confinement had allowed. Caleb fashioned a small seat from hay bales where Lily could safely watch the proceedings, giving her a carrot to offer the mare under supervision. Working together, Caleb and Maggie began the process of helping Belle regain her strength, walking her slowly around the barn and gradually lengthening circuits. The mare moved carefully but without obvious pain, her trust in them evident in her willingness to follow where they led. "She's doing even better than I expected," Maggie observed professionally, her hand running along Belle's leg, checking for heat or swelling. "Your care has made all the difference." "Our care," Caleb corrected gently. "We did this together." Their eyes met over the horse's back, understanding passing between them. Like Belle, they were healing, step by step, day by day. The process couldn't be rushed, but with patience and care, recovery was possible. "Horsey better?" Lily asked from her hay bale perch, observing the adult's pleased expressions. "Yes, sunshine," Caleb confirmed, leading Belle over so Lily could pat her nose. "Horsey is getting better every day." "Just like us," he thought, but didn't say, watching as his daughter gently stroked the mare's soft muzzle, her small face solemn with the responsibility. "Just like us." Summer stretched its golden fingers across the Lazy Bee Ranch. 2 months had passed since the storm that had changed everything between Caleb and Maggie. 2 months of careful steps forward, of shared parenting and stolen kisses after Lily was asleep. 2 months of learning each other again, discovering the people they had become during their years apart. Belle's recovery progressed steadily. From short walks around the barn, she had graduated to longer excursions around the paddock, her gait growing stronger and more confident each day. Maggie's practice with Doc Wilson flourished, her natural way with animals and practical approach winning over even the most skeptical ranchers in the area. And Lily, she blossomed like a wildflower after rain, soaking up the love and security of having both parents in her life. Her vocabulary expanded daily, her curiosity about the world around her insatiable. She followed Caleb around the ranch like a shadow, her tiny boots leaving prints beside his larger ones, her delighted laughter the soundtrack to his days. The town had noticed, of course. Small communities always did. Whispers followed Maggie at the feed store and the diner. Some kind, some less so. The girl who'd left the hometown hero for bright city lights, returning with his child in tow, moving back into his life as if she'd never broken his heart. "Don't let them get to you," Doc Wilson advised one afternoon as Maggie cleaned up after treating a difficult calving at the Anders Ranch. "Folks will talk till something more interesting comes along." Maggie smiled thinly. "I'm used to it." The vet school wasn't much different, just more sophisticated in their gossip. What she didn't say was how the whispers echoed her own doubts. Was she doing the right thing? Was she setting herself and, worse, Lily up for more heartbreak if things didn't work out with Caleb? These questions plagued her as she drove home that evening, the familiar landscape of rolling hills and scattered oak trees offering no answers. Home. When had Caleb's ranch become home? Lily and Caleb were in the corral when she pulled up, both focused intently on Belle. The mare stood patiently as Caleb adjusted a lightweight saddle on her back, the first she'd worn since her injury. Lily watched from her perch on the fence rail, secure in the circle of Jake's arm keeping her from falling. "Mommy!" Lily called, waving frantically. "Belle ride today!" "Is that right?" Maggie laughed, approaching the group. "Who's going to ride her?" "Daddy," Lily announced with complete confidence. "Belle ready." Maggie looked to Caleb, who shrugged with a mix of pride and humility. "I thought we'd try just a short session. She's been taking the saddle well for the past few days. No pressure, just getting her used to the weight again." "It's a good next step," Maggie agreed, her professional assessment aligning with her personal pride in how far they'd come with the mare's rehabilitation. "Her leg is strong enough now for light work." Jake excused himself, lifting Lily down from the fence and handing her over to Maggie. "Got some calls to make before dinner," he said, tipping his hat. "You folks enjoy the show." As Jake departed, Maggie settled on a nearby hay bale with Lily on her lap. "This is an important moment for Belle," she explained to her daughter. "She hasn't had a rider since she got hurt." "Belle's scared?" Lily asked, her empathy for animals already well developed. "Maybe a little," Caleb answered, still adjusting the saddle, his movements slow and deliberate to give Belle time to adjust to each new sensation. "But sometimes we have to do things that scare us to get stronger. Like when I pet the kitty?" Lily asked, referring to her recent nervous interaction with the barn cat's new kittens. "Exactly like that," Maggie confirmed, pressing a kiss to her daughter's head. "You were a little scared, but you did it anyway, and now you're not afraid anymore." Caleb caught Maggie's eye over Belle's back, both recognizing the wider application of the lesson. Sometimes the scariest steps were the most necessary ones. With the saddle secure, Caleb began the process of asking Belle to accept a rider. He put weight in one stirrup, then released it. Leaned gently across her back, then straightened. Each step was met with calm acceptance from the mare, a testament to the trust they'd built. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.